Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a beautiful day. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and to you mothers who have been both mothers and fathers. Happy Father's Day. It's a beautiful day here in Southern California. I just wanted to touch bases with black people in general to talk to my folks about what's going on in the world and about some possible solutions. I know we all have concerns, and we need to sit down and talk about some possible solutions to some of these issues that we're facing. Um, so, again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and to the mothers who have had to act as both mother and father. Happy Father's Day. It's a great day to be alive. I know it's 2020. We've had to deal with COVID-19. We've had to deal with protests, police brutality. We've and who knows what else is around the corner. This decade is going to be a decade like no other. This next 10 years from 2020 to 2030, technology is going to grow exponentially. So we as black people need to get on board and we need to be ready. One of the things I have proposed is that I'm asking you to do, and I've asked many people to do, is sign a petition that we might take America to court for its human rights abuses. This is really important. We may never see another time like this again where we have the support of the world. Everyone is behind us. Everyone knows the atrocities that America has placed on black people. Everyone knows, it's well documented, the slavery, the Jim Crow, the convict leasing, the debt peonage, you name it, it's all been documented. It's even in the history books. And right now we have such great support around the world that we can't let this opportunity pass without getting what's due us. And when I say what's due us, it's time for reparations, ladies and gentlemen. It's time that the United States government admits and apologizes for slavery and makes an attempt to repair the damage that was done. We are still suffering from the damage of slavery. We've never had an opportunity to heal from the traumatic experiences that we have endured over the last 400 years, to include watching our male counterparts during slavery, the men being tarred and feathered in front of the women and children, tied to horses and ripped apart, to modern day lynching where our children are exposed to the reruns of seeing black men, women, and children killed by the police at the hands of the police over and over and over again on the evening news. This is traumatic as well. We may not think so or may not see it as such, but I can tell you this is detrimental as well. This is PTSD. We have endured these things without any traumatic or any mental health help or any mental health care. And I am striving that mental health care should be free as part of a reparations package for black people. We should have free mental health and even medical health care, for that matter, for the rest of our lives, for those of us who are descendants of slaves. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a little about the petition that I put together that I think can open the door for reparations. We need to put America on trial before the world and let the world decide. The United Nations, all the nations coming together as we see them doing now and speaking out against the brutality. We need to join forces. We need to put them on blast in front of the world and have them apologize for slavery and seek reparations. If we can come up with $2.5 trillion or over $1 trillion to come up with a stimulus package for citizens because of the COVID-19, then certainly we can do $1 trillion to repair the damage that has been caused to black people over the last 400 years. We can definitely divvy that up between the 45 million or so, roughly, black people that are in America today. So the petition is entitled, "We the People of Color, Petitioners versus the United States of America, charge the United States with crimes against humanity before the World Court." And we can do this because we've been given carte blanche, if you would, by the Constitution itself. So in the name and by the authority of the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, we the people of color, duly organized and paneled, signed this petition to be presented to Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United States, Secretary General of the United Nations. Also the Congressional Black Caucus and the World Court. This indictment on the government of the United States of America, herein referred to as defendant, has used people of color for commercial advantage or private financial gain knowingly and willingly. We charge the United States with human rights abuses against black and brown people. Yes, black and brown people. For they have committed many atrocities: false imprisonment, capital punishment, privacy violations, racism, mass surveillance, imprisonment of the poor, homeless and juveniles, solitary confinement, imprisonment of nonviolent offenders, unjust stop and frisk laws, and the violent acts of murder by police officers on unarmed black people, which has created a clear and present danger to the nation as a whole. The United States condemns Russia, North Korea, and China for their human rights abuses, but says absolutely nothing about the racist and inhumane treatment of black and brown people in America. This is a human rights issue, a world issue. And the human rights of black and brown people in America are being violated every day. Therefore, we must take it to the United Nations and demand our rights as human beings. Just look at the human rights record of the United States. Their record is terrible. Slavery, the Trail of Tears, and the extermination of a whole group of people. Sex farms, the Ku Klux Klan, convict leasing, the Indian Removal Act, Rock Springs Massacre, the Chinese Exclusionary Act, Jim Crow, Black Wall Street, the massacre that took place there, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Tuskegee experiment, police brutality, racism, internment of Japanese in internment camps, Vietnam, Tamir Rice, spying on citizens, the Patriot Act, breaking international law with drone warfare, capital punishment, torture, and failure to close Guantanamo Bay, just to name a few of the things that America has done and is doing to people of color. So we bring the United States government before the United Nations and the World Court for its complicity in the existence of a genocidal plan for destruction of black Americans based on the United Nations' own definition of genocide. Now, mind you, this is the United Nations definition, not my definition, not your definition, but the United Nations definition of genocide. Any acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. As such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within that group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. This is the United Nations definition of genocide. Black people have endured legal discrimination, disenfranchisement, inequalities in health care, and violent incidents of police brutality. The United States government is both complicit with and responsible for this genocidal situation. Black people in America have suffered from genocide as the result of the consistent, conscious, unified policies of every branch of American government. The government has endorsed racism, monopoly capitalism, and violent white supremacy is at the core of American culture. You see us riot, you see us looting, well, where do you think we got it from? Every time we tried to stand on our own, to govern ourselves and have a economic base of our own, whites come in and destroy it. It's called white backlash. I'm writing a book about that. White backlash, the rule of law, profit over principle. Stay tuned, it's coming soon. The government has endorsed racism, and everything that has happened to black people in this country has been endorsed by the government. We have appealed to the conscience of America time and time again, marching and protesting until we can march and protest no more. But America's material greed, hate, fear, and racism only allows violence against blacks to continue. It is impossible for the government that created white supremacy, white privilege, and racism to solve the problems it created. Therefore, it must be taken out of American courts and taken before the world court. The Nuremberg trial set a precedent by establishing a permanent international court for prosecuting crimes against humanity. These trials were held in Nuremberg, Germany, for the purpose of bringing Nazi war criminals to justice from 1945 to 1949. The Jewish Holocaust, apartheid, the Gaza War, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Rwanda, and Sierra Leone all have been prosecuted for crimes against humanity, torture, rape, forced prostitution, pregnancy sterilization, mind you, sexual violence, kidnapping, murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, or forcible transfer of entire populations, imprisonment and deprivation of civil liberties. America has committed all of these unspeakable crimes and atrocities, but is never mentioned in this list of nations having committed these crimes against humanity. Most of white America ignores or never really hears the painful groans or the justifiable cries of anger that come from black Americans. The world is on the side of people of color. Other countries are not blind to the injustices of America. They are watching, and they see what America is doing to black people. As recently as 2014, the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination condemned the United States for racial disparity and police brutality, racial profiling, infrastructure discrimination, gerrymandering, and for the legal system being used to harm black and brown people. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is on our side. We cannot let this time pass. The world knows that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction and that terrorism and Saddam Hussein killing his own people was not just a justification for going in and killing him and taking over the oil in Iraq. The United States has a long history of human rights abuses, extremely cruel acts of violence, abuse, barbarity, savagery, wickedness, inhumanity, evil, and brutality towards other human beings. America has committed unspeakable acts across the world, trying to police the world without any authority. So let's go back to those documents, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence states, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which compel them to the separation. End of quote. That comes from the Declaration of Independence. That is the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. And it speaks directly to black people in America today, as it states that when any group of people have to separate themselves from a government because of the way they've been treated and assume their God-given human rights, that this group of people respectfully decree the reasons they are forced to separate or to ask for reparations and try to rebuild. And we, the black people, black and brown people of African descent of the United States of America, are forced to seek monetary compensation because of racial profiling, infrastructure discrimination, gerrymandering, systematic racism of the criminal justice system, unjust mass incarceration, extremely cruel acts of violence, discrimination in employment, legal disenfranchisement, genocide, inequalities in health care, crimes against humanity, capital punishment, torture, solitary confinement, murder, false imprisonment, racism, white supremacy, monopoly capitalism, redlining, and imprisonment of nonviolent black people, and the list goes on and on. Police brutality and murder of unarmed black people. Keith Childress, Betty Jones, Kevin Matthews, Leroy Browning, Roy Nelson, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and many others murdered by police are just a few of the many causes forcing blacks into separation from government, or at least reparations from government, to rebuild our infrastructures. Where there's a lot of talk about defunding the police. Well, we can defund the police and put some of that money in black communities where we can build our own police substations. And those police officers can come out of that community. And we can use our teachers and our colleges and to help with the recruiting process of individuals from the community. They know which individuals have the skills and the tools and would be good fits to be a peace officers within our community, coming out of high school or college. The second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence states, and I quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." End of quote. That's the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. And it speaks directly to us, black people. It gives us direction. It tells us it is evident that blacks have never been regarded as equal in this country. Despite what the Declaration of Independence states, but we have been endowed by God with human rights. And secure these rights we must. We must institute a sovereign government of our own, as specified in the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence declares that the government itself derives its power from the consent of the governed. Yet we know that black people never gave their consent to be governed over, but were kidnapped from their homes and forced into compliance. Therefore, it is the right of black people to say they do not or no longer consent to being governed by a government that is destroying black people, and wish to separate and institute a new government based on keeping black people safe, protected, and able to live free and clean in a clean environment conducive to their happiness. Now let's move on to the third paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. As it states, and I quote, "Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security." End of quote. That's us. That's the third paragraph, which states that wisdom or good judgment should keep people from overthrowing or changing governments for trivial causes. Black people, we have endured the pain and suffering and the torture for more than 400 years. History has shown that people are more likely to suffer the wrath, as we have, of bad governments for as long as they can before attempting to change the government we've become accustomed to. Well, black folks, we have endured slavery, rape, experimentation, forced separation of families, lynching, sodomy, whips, chains, disenfranchisement, convict leasing, Jim Crow, segregation, police brutality, the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and now our people are being shot and killed on the street for no reason. This long train of abuses that consistently attempts to destroy black people. We have taken all we can stand. It is our right, it is our duty to demand reparations from such government and provide for the protection and security of black families. Still, many blacks are opposed to any type of reparation because they become accustomed to the abuses of white society. Historians estimate that between 65 to 75 million black people were murdered during slavery. The United States of America has committed more atrocities than all of the countries that have been found guilty of committing crimes against humanity. The United States murdered an entire race of Indians, have exploited blacks for more than 400 years, lynched and raped Mexicans, and tortured and murdered Chinese, locked up Japanese in internment camps. It will always be a permanent stain on human history that the inhumane crimes of slavery, convict leasing, and Jim Crow, and the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and police brutality of blacks ever happened. It will always be an irritation and a nagging question of men and women of conscience as to why did it take so long for us to stand up and say we are not going to take it anymore. It is the responsibility of the United Nations to ensure equality among countries in the exercise of power within the world system. We have the right to be human, but that right is violated every day by poverty, not having the ability to have basic needs such as food, water, education, shelter, jobs, human dignity, and a healthy environment in which to live. It's time for America to have an honest discourse with itself. The United States could become the greatest country ever to exist if it would just be honest about its past and make an honest attempt to remedy its wrongs. We, the people who have signed this petition, understand that proliferation of police brutality and the murders of unarmed black people has reached epidemic proportions, causing serious harm to black communities in the United States. Therefore, we understand that this harm can only be described as acts of genocide by the United States government. Acts of genocide can also be attributed to the government's use of taxpayers' resources to wage war on a segment of the U.S. population, i.e. black and brown people. This is evidenced by the following: cutting back on welfare, privatization of public housing and prisons, and land grab schemes, and privatization of public education, racist immigration policies, privatization of basic health care, building prisons, and the expanding incarceration of millions of blacks and Latino youth. The high rate of ethnic minority incarceration is another American phenomenon attributed to genocide, disproportionate application of the death penalty to blacks convicted of the same crime as white. It is time for truth and reparation. It's time to formally apologize for slavery and make proper restitution. Restitution in the form of land and free mental and physical health care for African Americans. Now is the time for Black and Brown America to take the issue of inhumane treatment to world court on the grounds that our human rights, not our civil rights, our human rights have been violated. So please help us by signing the petition. It will be greatly appreciated. If you would sign the petition and pass it on to your friends to sign. Thank you for your support. It is appreciated. Let's bring America to justice. Hashtag family first. And hashtag Black consciousness. Let's be conscious. Let's be aware. You can go to my Facebook channel, or you can go to ipetitions.com. I say again, ipetitions.com. That's ipetitions.com. And just search for We the People of Color versus the United States. But I want to make it easy for you. Just go to my Facebook page or look at this video and go try to add a link to this video where you can go directly to the petition. Sign the petition. I'm looking for 1 million signatures. We can do this, y'all. We can't let this opportunity pass. You know, I think even Martin Luther King would tell us that it's time for reparations. We missed our opportunity during the civil rights movement. I believe we could have gotten reparations because we use boycotting and we use our economic strength to bring them to their knees. And we're going to have to do that again. We're going to have to watch where we spend our money and start spending our money with one another. But that's another video. Please go and sign the petition. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Much love, always and forever. We are family. Peace.